Elara and Leo, the island of beginnings. The summer they met felt eternal. The kind of summer that seemed to bend time itself, stretching days into golden eternities and nights into whispers of forever. The air on the Greek islands shimmered with salt and sun, and every surface, whitewashed walls, rippling sea, even the skin of those who lingered too long outside, seemed touched by light. Elara arrived first, stepping off the ferry with her paint-stained satchel, her hair tangled by the wind, and her eyes wide with the ache of wanting more. More color, more sky, more of something she couldn't yet name. She rented a tiny studio above the harbor, a room that smelled of turpentine and seaweed, with a single window that opened to the restless blue of the Aegean. Every morning she painted with the window flung open, her bare feet dusted with sand. She tried to catch the light as it moved across the water, but the sea kept changing. Teal in the morning, indigo at noon, violet as dusk fell. It defied her brush, laughed at her attempts. Still, she painted, chasing the horizon as though it might finally tell her what she was meant to become. 3 days later, Leo arrived. He came with a beaten guitar case slung over one shoulder, a backpack full of nothing in particular, and an optimism that could outshine the sun. He and his bandmates were staying at the taverna by the water, where locals gathered each night to drink, dance, and forget the passage of time. His laughter, low, bright, unrestrained, carried through the alleys, chasing away silence like a small miracle. They met because of a spilled drink. Elara had been sketching the harbor lights, lost in the way reflections trembled across the surface of the water. Leo, weaving through the crowd with a glass of red wine in hand, didn't see her until it was too late. The collision sent a crimson splash across her sketchbook, bleeding through the page in a sudden violent bloom. "Oh no, God, I'm so sorry," he said, grabbing napkins, his words tumbling over each other. Elara blinked, half annoyed, half stunned by the warmth of his presence. The wine spread across her drawing like a sunset exploding into the sea. "I think you just improved my painting," she said after a moment, a reluctant smile curling her lips. He looked up, his grin immediate and irreverent. "I'm good at making messes. Maybe that's a kind of art too." And from that moment they were entangled, two threads pulled from different stories, somehow finding a pattern together. Days slipped by in a haze of sunlight and salt. They explored the island as though it belonged only to them, wandering through olive groves, bargaining in markets that smelled of basil and lemons, sharing figs so ripe they burst between their fingers. She painted while he played, their rhythms colliding in accidental harmony. Sometimes she'd look up from her canvas to find him watching her, not with hunger but with quiet fascination, as though trying to memorize the way light lived in her hair. She painted him once, though he never knew. It was a portrait without his face, a figure of motion and sound, a boy made of sun and music. At 22, they were both beautiful in the way youth often is, reckless, certain, untouched by endings. They didn't speak of the future because the present felt infinite. Each sunrise arrived as a promise, each night as a secret kept between stars. They swam under the moon, their bodies ghost-like in the dark water. The Aegean wrapped around them like silk, black and endless. Leo spoke of music that could change people, songs that could open something in the heart. Elara spoke of color, the impossible shades that exist only in dreams, the ones she longed to bring to life. "Maybe we're both chasing the same thing," he said once, his voice barely above the tide. "What's that?" she asked. "Something that lasts." She smiled, and for a moment it felt true. That summer the world belonged to them. The sea remembered their laughter, the wind carried their names, and though they couldn't have known it, even then, every beginning carries the echo of its end. The comma, not the full stop. Summer by its very nature ends. The island began to loosen its hold on the season, each evening arriving a little sooner, the light dimming a little faster. The salt, sweet air turned sharp, the laughter of strangers no longer carried down from the promenade. Shops closed one by one, windows shuttered, Signs flipped to "See you next year." The cafes, once overflowing with sunburned chatter, now echoed with the hush of locals reclaiming their quiet. Elara received her letter on a Tuesday, slipped under the door with the usual post. The envelope was foreign, cream paper, embossed seal, her name printed in a formal serif that made her heart stop for half a second. She didn't open it right away. She set it on the kitchen table, beside a chipped mug and a vase of wilting sea lavender, and watched it in the shifting morning light, as though it might speak first. When she finally tore it open, her hands were unsteady. The words blurred before her eyes. Accepted. Scholarship. Congratulations. And she laughed, a small, startled sound that didn't quite feel like joy yet. Leo found her later on the beach, the letter folded neatly in her lap. He didn't need to ask. He knew from the brightness in her eyes and the silence that followed it. He sat beside her, his guitar case half buried in the sand, and stared at the horizon. Paris, he said softly, tasting the word like it was bittersweet. Paris, she echoed, and the tide came in around their ankles. That evening, his band got the call, a string of small venues across the states. Nothing glamorous, but enough to matter, enough to mean gone. Neither spoke of it at first. They carried on as though time were elastic, painting and playing and kissing through the shortening days. Their laughter filled the small apartment by the harbor. Her sketches of the sea lined the walls, and his music drifted from room to room like incense. They lived in a fever of pretending that seasons could be outwitted, that choices could be postponed, that love was a place one could stay if they just wanted hard enough. But the calendar was merciless. The morning of departure came, inevitable as tide. They stood at the dock in the orange light of dawn. The air was heavy with brine and farewells. The ferry horns sounded, a low, mournful note that seemed to vibrate through their bones. Around them, a few other travelers murmured goodbyes, but the world felt narrowed to the two of them, suspended between sea and sky. Elara's hands trembled in his. Her suitcase sat between them, absurdly ordinary, a poor container for all that was being left behind. "This isn't goodbye," Leo said, his voice cracking just slightly as he leaned his forehead against hers. His breath was warm against her tears. "It's just a comma, not a full stop." She laughed softly through the ache. "You and your metaphors." "They're all I've got," he said. The ferry crew began calling final boarding. The sound sliced through the moment like a blade. They promised letters, calls, visits. They promised to write each other into every day that followed. They meant it, truly meant it, in that fragile way people do when their hearts are too full to see the long shadow of distance. Elara climbed aboard. She turned back once more, her throat burning. Leo stood on the dock, sunlight gilding his hair, trying to look brave. He lifted his hand in farewell, and she raised hers in return, though the motion felt impossibly heavy. The ferry pulled away, the dock shrinking, his figure blurring into the gold-blue haze. The island receded, small and perfect, and gone. Elara pressed her palm against the glass and watched until there was nothing left but water and light. That image, Leo on the dock, the wind in his hair, the sorrow behind his smile, lodged itself deep within her. It would surface in quiet moments for years to come, in a cafe window streaked with Paris rain, in a melody drifting from a stranger's radio, in the pause before sleep when dreams and memory trade places. Because endings, she would come to understand, rarely announce themselves with a period. They linger, stretching on a comma, a breath, a promise still half-spoken. The distance between stars. At first they tried. Oh, how they tried! Letters arrived, heavy with ink and longing, each one a fragile bridge across the impossible miles. His handwriting grew messier with every city, smudged by rain, coffee, and fatigue, but his words still carried that same restless fire. "The road smells like rain tonight," he wrote once. "Sometimes I think I can hear your laughter between the chords." She replied in careful strokes of black ink, her paper flecked with paint. She told him about the ateliers where she learned to see light differently, how the professors dismantled her colors until she found new ones inside herself. They say I paint too emotionally, she wrote, but how else could I when everything still feels like you? Sometimes they talked on the phone until dawn, their voices soft bridges across oceans. I heard your song on the radio, she said once, half asleep, half smiling. He grinned through the line. Then you've already made me famous. There was laughter, then a silence that wasn't empty, just full. For a while they lived on those moments. The letters, the late-night calls, the steady pulse of shared dreams. They promised each other they'd meet again soon. Soon became a word that shimmered with hope, then dulled with time. As months slipped by, the spaces between their calls grew longer, stretched thin by distance and duty. Her days became consumed by deadlines, critiques, and the dizzy rhythm of creation. His by rehearsals, interviews, endless motion. The world demanded pieces of them both, and there was so little left to give each other. Their worlds, once fused in sunlight, began to drift, two planets caught in different gravities. One evening, she sat in her Paris studio, staring at a half-finished canvas of the Greek Sea. The blue refused to behave. It was too flat, too cold. No matter how she mixed it, it wasn't his blue, the one that shimmered in his laughter, the one that lived in the corner of her memory where the summer never ended. Across the ocean, Leo sat on the edge of a hotel bed, guitar across his lap, hotel lights bleeding gold across his tired hands. He played the same few notes again and again, trying to summon the melody that used to find him effortlessly when she was near. But every chord sounded hollow, unfinished. Sometimes he'd scroll through her old photos, the ones she used to send him in bursts of joy, paint-stained fingers, cafe tables, her shadow cast against cobblestones. He wanted to write back, to call, to say, I miss you. I'm proud of you. I still know the sound of your laugh. But what could he offer her except more absence? The silence between them grew louder than words. When the final call came, it was on a rainy afternoon, the kind where the sky looked bruised, heavy with things unsaid. She answered before the second ring, already knowing somehow what was coming. It feels like we're trying to paint the same sky from different continents, she said softly, her voice trembling like wet paper. He paused for a long time, the sound of rain filling the distance. I know, he whispered at last. The light is all wrong.